It is 6 o'clock. It is 6 o'clock now, so I open the regular Wenatchee School District Board meeting on today, Tuesday, September the 13th. And I ask us all to stand up and say the Pledge of Allegiance as I call you to order.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I welcome everyone to this board meeting and thank you for joining us, whether it be in person, online, or if you use the recording of the meeting later to keep yourself informed. We are grateful for everyone who makes their civic effort. Ofrezco una bienvenida a esta reunión de la mesa directiva del Distrito Escolar. Gracias por su asistencia, si sea en persona, online o usando el video más tarde para mantenerse informado. Agradecemos su esfuerzo cívico. The meeting is conducted in English, but if we are requested, we do have translation services so that citizen comment may be spoken in Spanish and be repeated in English. Si en el futuro alguien quiere hacer su comentario de ciudadano o recibir explicaciones en español, favor indique su necesidad. Tenemos disponible un servicio de traducción. The first item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Are there any requests from board members to modify the consent agenda as it appears? I take it that is a no. It includes the minutes from the 23rd of August, vouchers and payroll, the personnel report, the surplus report, contracts, and the enrollment and financial report through July the 31st of this year. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, Julie. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Laura. At this point, is there any discussion on the consent agenda?
I just want to thank staff for answering the numerous questions I had regarding the vouchers. And one topic of interest was the technology refresh. And would love to have a summary, a proactive summary at some future board meeting, just telling us about the life, one page summary or 2-page, however many pages it takes. It would be really interesting because I noticed that we are surplusing quite a few devices and purchasing others. And so it would be good to have that information in whole in front of us. Thank you.
And actually, I'd kind of like to add that to my wish list with a slightly different slant. We have spent a lot of money in software and systems and been very glad to be able to improve our system. Now we need to look forward at what we needed to do, maintain, replace it, and keep it going within the budget. So I think that would be timely to have information on that aspect. There being no other discussion, I will call for votes on the consent agenda. If you are in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. The consent agenda is approved. The next item on the agenda is citizens' comments, and which is the time for the board to welcome and listen to public comments. Comments do need to be scheduled beforehand. We have a 3-minute time limit. I will warn speakers when their time is about to expire, as it isn't easy to watch the clock. And having said that, Kim, do we have any requests? No requests from the floor either. Okay. Thank you very much then. Moving on, I don't think we'll beat last board meeting. We've got lots of good stuff to listen to tonight in terms of time. The first item then I'm going to turn over to Bill is the NOAA grant update.
Thank you. We have Joan Adams here to talk about the NOAA grant. Welcome, Joan.
Oh, geez.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you. Thanks for letting us be
Hi.
here tonight.
Thank you. So we're going to present on a third grade science grant that we collaborated on with for NOAA, so the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Sorry, I always have a hard time saying that one. So this was a grant that we had written for them and applies to all third grade science education.
Awesome.
So my name is Jen Herdman. I am a community engagement and education specialist with Cascade Fisheries. We're a salmon recovery nonprofit here in Wenatchee.
And I'm Joan Adams, your science coordinator.
Next, please.
Joan, you're going to need to step closer to the microphone. There are folks online who can't hear if you do not.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Joan Adams, science coordinator.
So we developed this partnership back in 2016, back before Joan and I were in our positions. I came into it in 2017. This started with just a single salmon tank and students raising salmon in their classrooms at Washington Elementary. And then in the following years, we've now expanded to every elementary school in the district, including Wenatchee Internet Academy. So we do have an online option for our students at home. So what our partnership hoped and accomplishes, I think, is providing a local connection to real world salmon recovery efforts. We're able to tap them into the work that we do and just show them in general that there are people in their communities that care about them and are willing to put in the time to help them help their environment as well. So Joan and I, our partnership, when she came into this position, we were able to completely expand our efforts from what they were before. We collaborated on this grant that NOAA made available. It's called the Bay Watershed Education Training Grant. And so we applied for this and we were awarded last year in August 2021 for about $100,000. And that focuses on teacher professional development and the student science education experience. So this is a hugely collaborative effort. Aside from Joan and I working together, we work with other local organizations and the tribal agency fisheries group. Thanks. So this is actually a video. I don't know if we can get sound.
This is not the slide for the PDF. I don't have a link for the video.
Okay, so I will tell you about the Bay Watershed Education Training Grant. So this is a grant. This is a program that's offered nationwide. So it was competitive. We went up against other organizations across the Pacific Northwest and were selected. I don't believe that there were more than maybe 10 grants awarded for this grant round, but it focuses again on getting teachers the professional development and support that they need. It's nice because it's totally locally relevant. So we were able to come in with the things that are important to us at the third grade level, what the students are learning goals are going to be. And so we were able to tailor the whole program to make it make sense for the teachers and the students here rather than a nationwide sort of thing. So yeah, it focuses on, there's a lot of different components. There's a framework that the agency that NOAA has put together, a teaching framework that highlights the importance of getting students outside, especially when they're looking at real world data and real world issues. Getting teachers comfortable with getting students outside is a huge obstacle that's been faced in bringing students outside. They don't often have the confidence or that sort of content information, especially when it comes to salmon recovery stuff. Not all of us are salmon professionals yet. And so that is sort of the big draw to this grant program, is that we're able to give teachers the support that they need and then have all the students benefit from that experience.
So in our first year, we worked with teacher representatives across the district, one from every school, to help to provide them with ideas to get their kids outside and help them feel comfortable with science curriculum in general. We know that a lot of elementary teachers are not specifically trained to teach science, and therefore the comfort level just isn't there. And so this grant has been huge in helping us help teachers feel more comfortable with science. So again, we worked with representatives last year, and now we're taking what we've worked on and presenting that to all of the teachers in third grade across the district. And what that means is, one of the things we've been able to do is to take our curriculum and make sure that it is taught district-wide in every classroom. We've been able to work towards equitability and inclusiveness with our students, giving them the opportunity to work with real-world data and work with this locally relevant issue of salmon recovery. So it's been really cool.
The highlight of the program is definitely just creating those unforgettable moments for these students, those wow moments that really get them excited about science. So that usually kicks off in the winter when eggs are delivered. That starts the process of students then raising salmon in their schools. Each school has their own tank and they all have it in a communal space, so everybody is able to use it. And they get hands-on activities such as trout dissections, which is the carnage you see here. This is definitely one of those wow moments when a lot of our students, especially if they have not fished with their families before or have seen fish in real life in a lot of cases. So this is the first opportunity that they're able to see that and get their hands on. So each year we've been lucky enough to be able to get enough. They dissect rainbow trout. We don't have enough salmon. So they dissect their own little rainbow trouts in small groups, and it's really hands-on. And then it culminates with that salmon release field experience where the kids are setting their salmon free at the end of the year. So focusing back on what the grant is providing. So it's an increase now in those outdoor experiences. This has been really kind of cool to explore because it opens up options for schoolyard science, which is becoming increasingly more utilized. So showing that you don't always have to get on a bus to go on a field trip and go somewhere to be able to understand the natural world. So we have incorporated more opportunities for students to get out in their schoolyards and investigate things like human impacts, water quality, and weather and climate. They're again collecting real data. They're using techniques that grown-ups and scientists use in the field. So they're getting mini job training in third grade. And then they're having the opportunity not only to meet with myself as a natural resource and salmon professional, but again, some of those other partners. So they're able to see people doing the work in their communities. Stewardship is a huge component. That's almost a requirement of the grant. We need to be able to show that students are not collecting data for the sake of writing numbers down, that they're doing something about it, their observations, what they're finding. So for third graders here in our district, what that means is that they're actually raising and releasing not just any salmon. So they're a part of the Yakima Nation Fisheries Coho Reintroduction Program. So this is actually a program that's been going on for, I think, over 20 years now. This was in response to coho basically being functionally extinct from the Wenatchee River for like 100 years. So this is the tribe's efforts to bring those fish back. So they're raising fish that are a part of that program, which is, I think, probably the coolest possibility that we could have had for potential fish to raise. In their classrooms, they are developing plans on how to address human impact related issues in their watersheds. They come up with plans to address pollution in the watershed. And then just this year, we were able to start having the students at their releases collecting water temperature data for the Columbia River. So that's been a part of something that, or another program that our organization is doing with community science. So the kids are contributing their water data to a database where we're keeping track of conditions in our rivers. And then at the end of the salmon release, each student is making a personal pledge on how they're going to commit to helping salmon in everyday life. And that's personal, that we give them some options and let them sort of come up with whatever it is that they feel that they are willing to commit to. And that's basically it.
That's where we are. Do you have any questions or would like to talk more about it?
We're here.
I think appreciation and comments are as appropriate as questions, but I'll let other people go if they want to.
I'm wondering, we received $100,000 grant. That's a pretty big deal. So congratulations on that. Is this program sustainable after a year's time? What is the, or what is the lifespan of the grant?
Yeah, absolutely. It is sustainable. We've been at this for a while and been able to expand it through every school, and our teachers are learning more about getting their kids outside and doing the science themselves in the classroom. They're feeling more comfortable with it. So therefore, there's your sustainability.
And did I understand correctly that a lot of the grant went into training and teachers and setting up so that the annual continuity comes out of time and getting presumably from other local helpers, the fish and eggs and so, is that right?
Yes.
Roughly, okay.
Yes, we have, as you could see, lots of community agencies that are working with us and have been for some time. So we've created those relationships and it's working out really well for our students.
Okay. Well, I want to say two things. I want to say thank you for explaining the acronym. And as a
So hard.
non-educator, I am beating the drum as educators speaking to the public. Let's always describe our acronyms so they can be understood. So don't call that a cheap shot. That's an opportunity. You did a perfect job. And then I was going to say, I'm really kind of in awe as to what happens. I'm showing how far I am away from reality. What I remember is two white rats coming home post-science retirement projects and pretty paintings of the rainforest. And I see this as a lot more statistics, knowledge of science, learning to manipulate things. It looks very, very rich. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'd love to have you join us at our release this year.
Yes, please come out.
I just want to say congratulations and good job. I got to experience the life cycle of a salmon a couple of years ago through remote learning with my third grader.
Yes.
And although they didn't get to go out and release, they did have the cameras that they watched the eggs and the development of the salmon, even though we were remote. And then I saw it also just flow into fourth grade when they went to the Rocky Reach Dam and learn all about salmon there and the chutes and all that. So, again, thank you for the instruction all about the life cycle of the salmon.
Thanks.
Super fun.
All right, thank you.
Well, thank you very, very much indeed. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the softball facilities finance options. And for that, I want to welcome our friends from Piper Sandler and turn it over to Bill to introduce the topic.
Thank you. We do have some special folks in the audience today. We're going to be sharing some finance options that were developed with the assistance of Trevor Carlson from Piper Sandler, who's in the audience tonight. And we are also fortunate enough to have our new finance director here in the audience tonight, Sean Fitzgerald. His official start date is next week. And we caught him in the district office yesterday and said, hey, we're going over softball financing. And he said, I'll be there. So we're glad to have Sean with us this evening as well. That hopefully they'll keep me in line here as we talk about these options. So a couple of things as we get started here, just an update on the work we're doing with the Office of Civil Rights. And we submitted additional details to the Office of Civil Rights in August, and I'm eager for a response that will allow us to move forward with the plans for a new facility. I will keep you posted as we hear back from OCR. There's your acronym. And I know they're reviewing the material now because I did get an email today with some information about that. So in the meantime, we want to be ready to go when we hear from the Office of Civil Rights. So I will be presenting information this evening about financing options for the construction of that facility. I have several options to share with you this evening. And then for each option, we will also look at the impact on our fund balance projections for the next few years. And the finance that I will present tonight, again, we had help from Piper Sandler. So Trevor is in the audience tonight to help field questions that may come up about the options. And in your board packet, you have considerable detail about each of the options, but I will highlight those as well. And Ron, if you want to move us to the next slide, we'll kick off with just a review of where we are budget-wise. So this slide is actually a reminder of the information we looked at in our August 9th budget hearing. Note that we have taken action already to set aside $4 million in a special category of our general fund balance for the purpose of moving forward with the construction of the softball facility. So with that in mind, if you want to focus on this busy slide somewhere, the ending balance row is a good place to focus. These numbers show our fund balance before any payout for the facility. So during the years when the project is actually funded, whether we finance or pay it directly, the fund balance, as you see here, will be impacted. And I will show an example of that on the next slide. I will also note that the fact that we are in the red in the unassigned category here out in 25-26 in this projection just shows that we have potentially some work to do to reduce expenses and maintain that 5% policy balance. But with the caveat that the further out we try and make projections, the less confident I am in the numbers. So that will potentially be true in any of the options that we consider tonight, with that caveat that the further out we try and project, the less confidence I have in the numbers. So the next slide shows an option where we just pay out. We've set aside the $4 million, and in this option, we just pay it out, and it supposes that the facility is paid for in the 23-24 school year. So you see our financing payment, the $4 million is going out in the 23-24 year, and you see in the ending fund balance, the immediate impact, and then that is carried forward. So if we were to not do any particular financing option, this is kind of what the impact would be on our fund balance moving forward. We'll pay the $4 million out, and the direct impact will come out as soon as the project is funded or in smaller chunks along the way to funding the project. So assuming we get it paid out in the next 4 years, our 25-26 fund balance would be around $7 million. So having seen this, we'll now explore some potential finance options. And so under RCW, the board has the authority to approve debt, but it must not exceed 0.3% of the value of our taxable property within the district. Now, we've done some look at what is our taxable property within the district and this 1%, and that would allow us a capacity of about 23 million. So we're well below that capacity should we choose to move on one of these finance options. And as we look at these options tonight, I mentioned before, I'll go into some detail, but we're not making decisions tonight. In the future, if the board does at some point decide to pursue one of the finance options at a later date, we will need to do a resolution and host a public hearing beforehand. So this slide provides an overview of 3 financing options that we'll be looking at in a little more detail this evening. And as I mentioned in your board packet, you have additional details. We've got a 5-year option, a 10-year option, and a 15-year option to consider tonight, each with close to 3% interest costs. And I'm going to explore each of these options in more detail one by one, outlining the amount of interest that is entailed with each option, as well as the impact on the fund balance. So let's start with a closer look at the 5-year option. All of these scenarios show what would happen if we use our $4 million that is currently set aside to pay for the principal amount of these bond type options, and then pay the interest using unassigned fund balance dollars. And I know this is a busy slide, so I will call your attention to a few focal points that I think are of interest. One would be the total interest during the financing term, as well as the total cost. So in this 5-year option, our total interest over the length of the term would be about $361,000, which brings our 4 million to a total cost of about 4.4 million. You see the impact on the fund balance in the ending balance line there is not as dramatic as what we saw in the previous slide where we paid it outright. And you can see, as you look at all of these options, the trade-off is our fund balance decreases less over time, but we pay the extra interest amount over time in order to do that. So that is the 5-year option with some impacts. One other thing that you see on this slide is we tried to dangerously project this fund balance out into 26, 27, 27, 28. And I mentioned earlier that I'm less confident in the numbers the further we get out, but we went ahead and tried to make those projections as well. You'll see that for the other options as well, that we tried to project out to 27, 28. So the 10-year option ends up with a total interest of about $707,000, which brings our total cost to about 4.7 million. Again, you see focusing on that ending balance. The impact is less dramatic than if we pay outright, but the trade-off is we have the total interest amount that comes along with any of these finance options. And the 15-year term, the total interest is the largest in this option with the interest rate around 3.15%. That is a little over $1 million in the interest, which would bring our total cost up to about 5.1 million. It is the least impact over time on the fund balance, but again, there's the trade-off in the amount of interest that we would pay if we went over the long term with the 15-year option. And again, I call your attention to our best projection, moving this out to the 27, 28 year. You see in the corner of the slide is we would still in that 27, 28 year be around a 10 million fund balance, with the trade-off that there is clearly more interest with the 15-year option over time. So information tonight about these options, an opportunity for the board to have some discussion about the options or to ask questions of Trevor Carlson, who helped put these options together. Not a decision tonight, but this discussion will set us up for a potential resolution in a public hearing as needed if we decide to pursue one of these options for the 5, 10, or 15-year terms. So does the board have any questions for myself or for Trevor regarding any of these options?
I noticed that the unassigned minimum fund balance stays the same because that is calculated on a percentage of expenses, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And because the 4 million is set aside, there's no change to that minimum fund balance amount in any of the scenarios, correct?
Yes, because it's based on our expenses, and we would be, the 4 million's already set aside, so we would be using the 4 million to pay the principal amount, and we've already set it aside in our general fund. We would be using the other unassigned dollars to pay for the interest on the amount over time.
And I just want to make sure that we point out that already we are below in the years 2023, 24, 24, 25, 25, 26. We are already below the 5% minimum fund balance per board policy. in the budget that we adopted.
That is our projection. Yes, we have some work to do there.
So I guess that's just a caution that we need.
Well, am I
Carefully.
I'm sorry. Just how certain are we that, being the new one here, how certain are we that the softball field cost is going to stay at what we're estimating now, or what we're allowing? And what do we do if it doesn't?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's always variability in construction costs. My understanding is that the 4 million was based on an estimate that had some capacity in it. But I would need to look a little bit more into where that number came from, as it kind of came before I
Yeah,
stepped in.
I seem to keep recalling something like the total when it was all built and done was somewhere going to be in the 9 million range. And so I think we got to a place where we were comfortable that it would be at least at minimum 4. And then I feel like we've stuck with 4, and I can't remember if that was because that's everything revised back down where we ended up, or if it's still likely only to be a large part of the cost, and maybe the majority of it, but not quite the full estimate.
Yeah, that's a good point, Julie. And I seem to recall that in looking over some of this information, I saw an option that was around 9 million that actually used potentially one of our Okanagan property.
Okay.
And I think the additional cost there had to do with bringing in utilities, et cetera. And for that reason, I think that option was off the table because of the cost. I think that's where the 4 million number came into play, was that the location we're looking at is on our current Wenatchee High School site, which would not require such an extensive amount of work to bring in utilities. I could be wrong about that, and I can look into that.
I think if I can do a little bit of directing on this, we are having a discussion, and I would very much like board members to air their questions and their thoughts. We're in kind of a discovery mode. So I think it's correct that we do not yet know what the actual cost would be. I believe Bill is correct that the 9 million was for an offsite greenfield option, which has been abandoned. So that number is not part of it. But we cannot say with certainty what the actual number would be, which is the reason why this is exploratory. So we can think about financing options. And I think it'd be necessary to have harder information before we got to an action item.
Can you just re-explain to me, because I'm a little confused. If we've assigned 4 million to the capital, now we've pulled it aside expecting to spend it, but now we're looking at a bond or a loan essentially to do that. I look at it as sort of, instead of using our own 4 million and just sort of paying it back, or at least over more time. I guess I'm not wrapping my head around the way it's still shown that we've got 4 million sitting out there, but we've also got 4 million that we're using over time.
I'd like
Can
to, Can
I piggyback on her question here? And what are the pros and cons? What are the pros and cons of us just paying it outright? What are the pros and cons of financing? Just a very simple, basic explanation. Maybe we can hear.
Actually, that's kind of where I was going to go by describing the way I'm looking at it. The 4 million was set aside as a way of forcing us not to ignore the liability. It's there. It shows up, as Laura says, in the 4th year where in red on the unassigned. But that is a non-cash liability the way it's set up. It's a reserve. So then we're looking at a situation of amortizing it with interest, if you call it that, which actually will cost more dollars over a longer period of time than paying immediately. Let's assume the 4 million is correct. And as a result of that, if you look at the, call it the bookkeeping display, our deficit in the balance in the 4th year actually increases all the time we pay interest, because we're paying it out of our regular funds. So you can say that's a con. The pro would be what I see as cash management and liquidity, where we do, Bill said, look at the ending balance. That's the real money in the bank account, if you call it that. And so by pursuing an overtime option, we are giving ourselves a little bit of a leeway liquidity wise and spending some money. So it's kind of a risk management. And on top of that, we have to throw in accuracies and variances in both our revenues and expenses over the future years and our ability to adapt. So I'm going to say there's a lot of uncertainty, but I would almost ask say that I think it's a trade-off between cash liquidity and spending a bit of interest, whether you find that keeping your reported unassigned balance less, but having less cash, therefore you've got less cushion for a cash surprise, which way you prefer the risk.
Can you explain a little bit on the unassigned?
Yes.
Oh, you go, Bill.
Go ahead.
I guess I'm going to talk a little bit on that. It is a notional amount. We have a policy to maintain. Is it a policy or a precedent? Policy, I believe, to maintain a minimum of 5%, and therefore we have to police ourselves on that. That doesn't mean to say that you can't spend it so that you are out of compliance with your policy. You would have to take corrective action to avoid that.
Right, I understand that. So that the last column I'm looking at on any of these slides, unassigned to minimum fund balance. Would be the fund balance we would have, the reserves.
No, that's the minimum that we have pledged to have.
So the unassigned, the column above, unassigned, that is the amount that would be.
I call that a deficit. That's where
Okay.
we're out of compliance with our minimum reserve requirement.
And that obviously puts us on an improvement plan with OSPI. Is that right?
Yes, no, it doesn't. It doesn't put us on an improvement plan with OSPI, but it puts us in a situation where we need to, be watching our expenses closely. The way I think about it is the unassigned amount is like your cash amount, and the unassigned to the minimum fund balance is your savings that you don't want to touch. So that unassigned amount is kind of like a spendable amount, unless there's an emergency. So the minimum fund balance is to protect us against things that might show up as an emergency. And we would use the unassigned amount as kind of our spending for things that might come up and not dip into the minimum fund balance unless it was an emergency situation.
But based on this, on like, for example, the 15-year, I'm looking at 25, 26, we're in the hole. Am I reading that right?
Yes, but if you look at the ending balance, the line that says ending balance, that line item improves with the longer that you finance the project, basically. So your cash flow is better if you finance long-term. You keep more money in the bank versus if we spent $4 million and build it right now today, that $4 million would disappear from our bank account. But if we're buying it on time, then only the amount of the annual payment, well, the capital, the principal piece would well, actually, no, the principal would come out of the capital $4 million and the interest would come out of our operating budget.
Right. That's how these options were designed.
Right.
Okay, so the capital would come out of, say that again? The principal?
The principal would come out of the $4 million we set aside. but
Okay.
The interest would come out of our general fund.
Gotcha, thank you.
Is there any sense, and I realize it's a different funding model, this isn't elected or anything like that, but we've talked about doing an elected bond at some point potentially. Is there an appreciation for how this could impact future bond proposals?
So my understanding, and this might be a spot for Trevor to jump in, is that we received the bond rating from the state and it's backed in that way. But Trevor, would you address that question? Trevor Carlson from Piper Sandler.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here tonight. From the school bond guarantee program that Bill is alluding to, that is for voted bonds. So only voted bonds achieve and have the ability to utilize the school bond guarantee program, which you could think of as a cosigner program, if you will, on a voted bond for any reason. If the underlying school district is not able to pay, the state pledges to make investors whole. So with a scenario that is general fund backed, such as the one you're discussing today, there would not be that cosigner program. But I think the question was, would this have an impact to a future voted bond authorization? I think on the margins, there is additional leverage that the district would have on its books that would go into the credit decision that Moody's or Standard & Poor's would engage during that process. Another consideration would be to have the voted bond authorize the repayment of such transaction that you're discussing today. But we're talking multiple steps in the future, but that is something that could be a consideration.
This does impact our total bonding capacity.
Correct.
Yes.
It does.
Okay, so that
Yes.
makes, well, depending on what the interest rate is, I suppose whether it makes sense to wrap it into a new bond or not.
That's part of the equation. The other part of the equation is, think of your voted bond is a different bucket, right? Those are excess unlimited property tax collections. So that would be taking the general fund obligation off the books and putting it into that bucket of the voted excess property tax collection bucket, right? So it'd be taking the liability off of the general fund, placing it onto the unlimited property tax pledge via the voter authorization.
But we could also, in past bonds, when we've not spent the full amount that we are authorized for, we have later enacted a resolution to pay for additional projects. Could we do that yes? Okay.
Yes. School districts have immense flexibility in coming back via public hearing process and changing the scope of the voted bond authorization. Which,
Okay,
right,
yeah.
think of it happens, after years and years of construction, there may be state match monies that are setting aside, and you have the ability to tell the public and ask them for any comment and make the decision on how those funds can be applied.
It might be good to have that flexibility reserved for the longest time possible.
Yes, yes, for sure. Flexibility is key.
Gotcha.
Did I answer that question? Okay.
You're doing great, Trevor. Any other questions for Trevor? Thank you for being here.
But I couldn't have said it any better. President Barron, just kind of weighing the pros and cons. That was perfect.
Thanks. And that's really what, if I were to make one comment, I think this is the pros and cons of liquidity versus a graded deficit. And I do want to go back to something that we said, I think, in public at the approval point of the budget, when we discussed the fact that we had a deficit in the fourth year. And Laura and I are both on record in previous years for saying we don't like that, we prefer not to be. But I think two things happened. The superintendent consulted, and that's a relatively small amount. And I also believe the superintendent, in presenting the budget, said he had every intention of working very hard over the time to remedy that. And I introduced that with pros and cons, because I think the pros and cons also are a question of having more time to react and adapt. So this is not a decision. This is for us to air thoughts, go away, get more facts. And if and when we come back for a decision, hopefully we have a better basis.
I guess my last question would be, what do we foresee as the timing on this? Or do we wait until we're closer to shovel ready before taking this out? Or is this interest rates are good? Let's just, because we know we're going to need it at some point in the near future, going to take something out. I mean, I don't want to pay on it until we really have to.
So in looking at a potential response coming from OCR that might allow us to move forward, I wanted to get these options on the table so that we had a discussion started that would expedite funding options or decisions about funding to move that project forward. I hope to move the project forward as quickly as possible after we receive a response from LCR.
So I do have a question piggybacking on Julie's question about interest rates. So, interest rates are rising, but what goes up will come down ultimately. So if we end up getting a higher interest rate than we'd like, and can we refinance at a later date?
Yes, the process from the financing perspective, just let's say round number 8 weeks by the time you say, let's go. There's some process and procedure that needs to happen, the public hearing, the posting prior to the public hearing, just, add some additional weeks into the schedule. So let's just say 2 months by the time money is in the bank from the financing. Interest rates have been volatile this year. They've been on an upward trajectory. One of the key points that I would like to bake into the potential responses from banks that would be lending the school district the funds would be to have an optional redemption feature, Laura, which would allow us to have that refinancing capabilities. And banks at this point in time are okay with that type of an arrangement. Yeah, great question.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trevor. The next presentation I will give, it is on a status report on the superintendent search. And I'm just giving a verbal report because just keep everybody in the picture here. We put out a request for proposals to search consultant firms. As of today, we have received 4 completed proposals. These will be studied and evaluated after the submittal deadline, which is 1 p.m. this Friday afternoon. We have 1 firm who completed an intent to respond, but has not yet submitted a proposal. 1 firm replied they might consider making a proposal, and we don't know anything more than that. And the other firms that we contacted were no longer active in this field or declined to respond. So I'm expecting that we will probably have 5 proposals to look at beginning Friday afternoon. The search committee, which is me and Vice President Maria Niegas, will evaluate the received proposals, and we plan to bring a recommendation on which firms should be invited for interviews to the 9/27 board meeting 2 weeks from now for the board to make a selection, choice and approval. I do want to say related to that the proposals are held in confidence by the district, but individual board members may make a request to Executive Assistant Kim White to read the proposals for the purpose of making an informed decision. Moving ahead, so you see what the scenario is, interviews for those selected are scheduled for the week of October the 3rd through the 7th. The actual dates and time will have to be agreed between the selected firms and the board interviewing committee. At this point, I make kind of a little shamefaced apology. 15 months ago, I made a commitment to be away from Wenatchee during that particular week. But actually, I think you have a better committee than without me. So I'm appointing Maria Niegas to chair the committee for the interviews. And I've asked Laura Jakes, who has knowledge, she's the only one of us who has participated in a search process before from her previous experience, to be the second person on the committee for making a recommendation. Also, the North Central Educational Services District Superintendent Michelle Price has again come to our aid and with her organization, and kindly consented to sit in on the interviews to provide what I think of as an expert person who sort of interprets and consults us so we understand the content of the interviews and the applications. It'll be the committee's responsibility to recommend the selected search firm to the board at the 10/11 meeting, if we're on that schedule, and the board will then make a decision on who will be the research consultant. From then until December, the selected search firm will work with the district in community engagement. That's with students, parents and families, staff, and district leadership to develop search criteria and a position profile that will be designed to serve Wenatchee's unique needs and objectives. Approve the profile and recruitment process and start that is the January 10th board meeting. What I've outlined is so far exactly follows the published request for proposal. So that is my information to the board and the community, and I will take questions and comments.
I guess I just question about how we're selecting the committee that gets to do this. I had kind of hoped we'd be sharing some more of the responsibilities, and we had a couple that worked with Michelle to engage the interim superintendent. I know you and Maria did some of the work on the RFP itself. It kind of feels like some are being excluded, and I'm not really clear why.
I'll say two things. Well, one of the reasons I talk about the board, we're bringing it to the board as much as we can because of that. The president is under policy authorized for situations like this where we have to it. As we go through the whole process, we will involve the board as much as possible, and we can rotate committees over the latter part of the 10-month project. But this right now, Laura was the one with her previous experience who assisted me as president during the initial critical phase when we looked for an interim superintendent in the process. I then felt it was appropriate to bring in the vice president as the second person. And that's continued. Knowing that I'm absent, I look for the most experienced person for that particular phase, which is the interview. And all along, we're trying to keep you as much informed as we possibly can. And we intend you to be able to have robust reviews when you have to make a decision and get lots of information.
I do have to say that I agree with Julie. I feel like I've volunteered every opportunity I can and to be a part of some kind of committee in terms of this, and been kind of shot down. So I appreciate you saying that, Julie, because it's something that I very much want to be involved in. And the only way for people who do not have the experience to then have the experiences to be able to be involved in these choices. I mean, right off the bat, I will absolutely go to Kim and ask for the proposals from the different companies, because I do want to see them, read them, and have the ability to see exactly what they've said without your then interpretation and decision.
And that was the reason for doing that.
And for the record, I maybe haven't picked this particular type of consultant before, but in my real life work, this is what I do regularly, day in and day out, is draft and help with proposal responses and contracts and agreements. So I feel like I have a fair amount of experience and knowledge that I could bring to something like this. So that's maybe why it's a little disappointing to not be given an opportunity to participate in something like this.
Okay, I have listened to both of you and we'll take that into consideration. Thank you. The next item is another discussion item, or the first discussion item, first read of the policy. So we'll turn that over to Bill and the policy committee.
Thanks, Martin. So we have a number of policies to look at for a first read tonight, and I'm going to just briefly talk about each of those. And then as we do them individually, I'll ask the members of our policy committee, Maria and Catherine, if they have any additional input for this first read. And we'll start with policy 3122, which is in regards to excused and unexcused absences. The update to this policy is based on House Bill 1834, which states that the rules defining absence must categorize an absence for a mental health reason as an excused absence, which is the major change in the updated policy, is the addition of that mental health as a reason with an excused absence. And the legislators who supported this bill cited that when school districts classify mental health absences as excused, it sends a message to students, parents, teachers, and administrators that mental health is accepted and matters. There were a few other minor changes to this policy that brought us in line with the current state law. And anything to add on this one, Catherine, Maria?
I think there were a few important points that for me were important about parents being required to date and acknowledge the attendance information. So keeping that was something that we had discussed. Having that in there is fantastic. That not something new, not something unusual, but that was looked at by us. Again, it covers us because we give that policy out to parents and say, here's the attendance. We're all on board with this, and kids are going to show up. In that vein, being at the high school today, they are really taking that responsibility, put it back on the kids, and attendance and tardiness and showing up with your ID card is huge, and they're not letting anybody in there without those things. So that I think it's wonderful. And then having that on board with the parents, I think is great. But no, other than that was the only thing on that policy.
Just as a reminder that actually all the policies we're looking at today are in compliance with the House bills that have recently passed and been drafted. The revisions have been drafted by the WASDA legal team.
Do you want any questions or feedback as we go policy to policy, or save for the end? Because I just had one.
Let's do it policy to policy while we're on that.
Okay, so the only thing I thought that was not necessarily a recommended change, but I think we could make the change, is to remove the specific references to COVID-19, because I think we're covered in just saying that if the school closes for any communicable disease related reason, my understanding is that we're going to sort of have an official declaration of the end of COVID in about a month. So to write something so specific into a policy that may or may not be relevant in a month doesn't make sense, but I think we've got the spirit and intent covered by everything else that's in there. So my recommendation would be to just, while we're in this policy right now, clean it up one more time and remove specific references to COVID-19.
Thank you. Okay, I am going to group the next three together because they're very highly related. It's policy 1400, 1410, and 1420. These are updated based on the WASDA updates in regards to House Bill 1329, which concerns public meeting accessibility and participation. And that bill encourages public entities such as our board here to provide increased public access and participation in meetings through internet and other readily available means of remote access to the meeting. And together, these three policies essentially solidify everything the district has done to adapt during the pandemic and that we've continued to do for these board meetings in terms of accessibility. Maria, Catherine, any adds to those three?
Well, my ad, but same from when we met, was I appreciated the article where it talked about parent participation and people that show up to our board meetings, and they shouldn't be showing up just during the controversial times to look for a show. That we should appreciate who shows up and encourage people to show up, because this is their school district, this is the community's glue, and we need to keep encouraging them to be here and have a voice and participate.
I think for the most part, our technology team has been doing a really good job at having, doing what is now required. They've been doing it for years. So just a kudos to our technology department. And one of the things that was just recently passed was the that it's and now it's embedded in the House bill is knowingly carrying onto a location where a school board meeting is held. To me, that is carrying a firearm or any sort of weapon. Given our experiences from past meetings, I think that was very important for anybody in the public service entities to highlight that in a policy. So, thank you.
Thank you. So policy 4218 is probably the most substantive in terms of revision, and it deals with language access, and it's based on provisions in House Bill 1153, which is now an essential policy for boards. And the language of the bill stipulates a number of policy changes for districts and schools, as well as increased professional training and credentialing for interpreters and translators that work in an education setting. I know that related to this policy, OSPI is going to be working to improve the home language survey, which is part of our enrollment packet that seeks information about the language spoken in the home for our students, and also the first language or the primary language learned by a student as they come into the district. So OSPI is looking at some revisions to make that stronger. It also calls for the designation of a language access liaison in the district. So we're going to be looking at who is the best fit to serve in that role. And that person will be highly connected with the procedures associated with this policy. Maria and Catherine, adds on this one?
Again, this is something that I feel our district has been doing a really good job. We do have a little bit of work to do of what we do when families or the public comes in and needing a language other than Spanish. What resources are available through OSPI. I know in the past they provided such service, but so just having those services available for all families, not just our Spanish speaking community.
Yes. Okay. Great, thank you.
I do have a half comment, half question on that. Just tell me if I'm correct. I think it says we have to have a procedure in place by the 23-24 year. Not, so the policy is coming in first, because precisely what Maria is talking about, I think there are areas in the policy that are going to be difficult to achieve and require development. Am I correct? Yeah.
Procedure or the policy?
Well,
You are correct.
it's easier to say it in the policy than to do it in the procedure, and it will take time and investment to get the procedure in line. And we have a year to proceed and do that properly. That's the point I would make. So yeah, I think it's serious work that we have to do. It's valuable, but not easy. Okay.
And thank you. So the last policy here, the 3116 is in relation to foster care. And in particular, it's related to House Bill 1955, which deals with dependency proceedings. For students subject to dependency proceedings, this legislation changes requirements that are connected to the transmission of educational records. It also includes language about reviews of unexpected or excessive absences for students in foster care, and goals of continuing educational continuity along with associated transportation. It's highly related to some of our Title I components that you will actually see a special presentation on in coming months. We have a number of areas supported by Title I dollars that provide enhanced support for students in foster care and also students who are in homeless situations that are related to this policy. Maria and Catherine, adds on this one.
I think that we were discussing something, Laura, I think you had brought up the different issues with the FTEs or for the kids that were, that's not where we were looking at that.
That was 3141 or something.
3114.
Yes, that is 3114.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, that's all right. I will mention that briefly. We are doing some work on 3114. It is, yeah, there are actually two policies there, 3114 and 3131 that we're looking at in terms of shared FTE, and we're moving some things forward to expedite some things for a student who's in need of a change in that policy. And that's moving forward while we continue to work on the policy and procedure piece.
Bill, I think you skipped 3432.
There's a bunch of these.
Emergency.
Okay, let's go back. Thank you. Policy 3432 on emergencies. This is an updated WASDA policy related to House Bill 1941, which is prohibiting active shooter scenarios for school safety related drills. There were some schools who were engaging with students in school shooter scenario type drills that were not announced as not real and included dramatization of wounded individuals, et cetera. And this bill seeks to prohibit those types of drills in a school setting and acknowledges that although drills are important and the way we respond to active shooter situations is important, also the manner in which those kinds of drills can result in undue psychological harm is an important consideration.
Unbelievable.
Any adds to that one?
That's fine. Then we discussed that presentation. Is that coming forward or with Mr. Coe? And the kind of changes that, well, I can pull it out because remember Maria, I carry it with me everywhere. And how that's being announced to the public and.
Yeah, so Tom Cooey came to our meeting and he, we aligned the order of the drills to the document that the district received. I think we all got one in our box. So that
And this
they
was
just
also,
align with that card.
yeah, and this was also put out to all the parents kind of, yeah, online, but yeah, kind of lining that, outlining that and lining that up according to how the additional, there were a couple of additional changes that we did in that, but it was, again, very good to hear from him and hear the explanations for these as well. And again, I'll communicate it to parents and so.
Great. And we will have Ron and Tom are going to do some safety updates at a future board meeting as well. We'll get to look at some of those things with them.
Good work to the committee.
Can-
Thank you for your diligence.
Can I just
on
jump
that.
back to 1400 real quick? We kind of moved on and I didn't get.
Oh, yes, please.
I just, this is the meeting conduct and order and I, no issue with the substance of it because it follows what the changes were to the law, but just a couple thoughts on cleaning it up. There was, and I can suggest these in like a red line back to you because they're just minor changes, but there was under the regular meeting section, the second paragraph, that's a whole new ad, seemed redundant of what's immediately precedes it. So my thought would be strike that paragraph.
Okay.
And then there were some musts in here that probably should be wills, probably just old cleanup from translating a policy, what a district should do. We're saying we will do it. So I would just clean up some of them that the district must do something. It's that we will do this.
What was the first paragraph you referred to?
So under the regular meeting section, there's two sections that are proposed additions, talking about in case of emergency, and honestly, I'd say in cases of emergency, including fire, flood, earthquake, or other emergency. It talks about what we'll do, and in the instance of remote learning, how we'll make things available. And then there's that next paragraph that almost verbatim is almost verbatim to the paragraph before it. It says the district will hold remote or physical attendance limited in-person meetings only in the case of emergency as declared. I think we've kind of covered that point in the above paragraph. So my thought would be just to strike that added section.
Thank you.
Actually, I like that clarification because I think the definition of the word emergency could be an issue with the way it's written right now.
Right. I agree. I don't want to be too limited. So I like saying include.
Okay, so emergency then becomes somewhat more widely interpreted as we understand it.
Correct.
Okay, I think that's a good move.
And then there was just one catch on page 2 in the new added text, where it says the board will not take final disposition on any matter. We probably should say final action because that's kind of the term of art used in, and that's an old, not proposed to be changed word, but it's just as I'm reading through it, we're talking open meetings, they talk in terms of action. So I'd say the board should not take final action on any matter that other than those stated in the meeting notice. And then in that new added section, there's on about the third line down, it says when time requirements of such notice would not make notice impractical. I think that should be meeting when the time requirements of the meeting would not make notice, the 24-hour notice practical, and I can send these, but I just wanted, there's such minor changes, but I also realized in second read, we don't often like read and talk about things again. So I just wanted to talk about them now, what I would be proposing as minor changes, but nothing to the major substance. I guess the only other one was we added that the new law about carrying firearms, my thought would be to put it in the public attendance and comment section of, so just move it down one section. We brought it in the meeting conduct and order of business, which seems to apply to how the board is conducting its business. I think it probably should go to the public attendance and comment section, but all the text itself is fine. It's just moving it down. Minor. Minor edits. That was it. And I can send them in red line to Kim so you can all see them.
Is the policy committee content with taking that and working for the second reading?
I'm okay with
Yeah, okay.
I'm okay.
Thank you. On discussion on policies then, right? The next item is an action item. It's the Public School Employees of Wenatchee Bus Drivers Collective Bargaining Agreement, and I will turn that over to Bill.
Thank you. So this was a great bargain in terms of the way bargains go. And we had some good things come out of this, I think, for staff and the district as well. You'll note there was a 10% increase to step one on Schedule A for salaries, which really that brings our step one for staff up to the competitive market rate. And then the step increases after step one that were outlined on the opening page for you really reflect that in the past, the distance between those step increases was not consistent. This added some consistency. They're all now either a +2 or a +3%. But overall, the bargain went very well. And we were happy to reach an agreement and to do it really pretty quickly with this group.
Any questions? Okay, in that case, do I have a motion to approve, let me get right, the collective bargaining agreement between Wenatchee School District and the Public School Employees Wenatchee Bus Drivers with our number and their SEIU local 1948 number.
So moved. So moved.
Second.
That is good.
Second.
Thanks, Laura, for seconding. Any discussion at this point?
I rode on a school bus with about 80 kids last week. Well deserved.
Are you going to become a plaintiff and an activist then? No, I want to thank, Bill commented, it sounds like there was goodwill and constructive work on both sides of the table, and I want to thank both parties. I think that sounds good. If there is no discussion, I will call for a vote. Those in favor, please signify that by saying aye. Aye. So this collective bargaining agreement is now approved. And we move on to board communication. And signal if you want to speak.
So on my trip on that bus ride, I got to experience the Mozart's Voyage show at the PAC last week, which was fabulous. Everything about the partnership between the symphony, the school district, the Performing Arts Center, I think for a lot of our kids at that age have never experienced live art, a Performing Arts Center, a symphony. So what a great opportunity of exposure for kids that it's first time experience it, maybe the only time they experience it. So thank you to the Performing Arts Center for hosting the fifth graders in the whole district. And yeah, it was a fabulous, the theme of the act was great. I mean, everything about it, the live performances were just amazing. I was part of the hiring team that hired the new PAC director last summer. And one of the things that I recall from my time here, working at the school district, was every kid at the pack. And so I was very happy to see that continuing, again, for those reasons that I mentioned, exposure to the arts for all our kiddos in that opportunity. So let's continue those partnerships. They're valuable.
So, just so everyone knows, the General Assembly where we vote our preferences to WASDA is at the end of the month. I think Kim sent you all an email with the priorities that we voted last year or that Michelle submitted. So I'll essentially do that again. WASDA's finalized their manual of what their policies they're forwarding are. They didn't change from what they initially put out in August. So if you've had a chance to read, or if you have a chance to read through them and want to send me your top 10 to 12 so that we can kind of put together a matrix. I also have sort of the matrix work that we did a couple years ago, if anyone is interested in looking at that, or to see how we all kind of match up and get the top few. But ultimately, if you send me probably by the end of next week what your individual preferences are, we can put them together, and I'll send out what it looks like they'll be, and then I'll forward those to WASDA to vote for us at General Assembly. Any other participation is desired, let me know.
Thanks, Julie. So you're sending us out again, the pre-existing list of priorities.
So
Is
you should already have that. Kim sent that out, what was voted last year, which was okay. So apparently only Maria and I got it. So I will,
I
or
was thinking
Kim
I
can
did
forward
get
it to
it.
all of you, because I don't want to get in that meeting.
I saw
issues.
the old
Okay.
list that we submitted, but I didn't see how many choices are there?
The book, there's hundreds.
Okay.
But we kind of narrow in on like 12 always just jump out as like the big ones. They're hot topics. So invariably we'll have 6 to 8 that are similar, just in different, and I ask you to rank your preference. So I'm going to assume if you're the first thing you put on your list is your highest ranking proposal. I for some reason thought it went to everybody, but we do have the list. Kim has it. Kim will send it to all of you so you can get a refresher what was voted last year. And then flip through the manual and figure out what you think is important individually, and then we'll put together a spreadsheet of the top 10 to 12.
wonderful. Thank you.
And speaking of transportation, I have a very new appreciation for our transportation staff, since my oldest is now doing school sports. And I can't imagine what fun it is to leave the school at 5 in the morning and get back at 12:30 in the afternoon and sit around for soccer games and dead time in Seattle and Sounders games and on the I-5 traffic as I'm watching her little tracker app get to the game at 1 mile an hour, and just doing that when you probably don't even have a kid on the team. And so our staff that do these things for us are amazing.
And oh boy, I can absolutely echo that. Band competitions, because those bus drivers come and they stay for, the 6 or 8 hours that we're there. But boy, is that wonderful. And I got to help organize the band uniforms today for them to be fitted for tomorrow. Very exciting time at the high school. Much cooler than it had been previously. So I'd be interested to hear a quick update about that. But the other parents that joined me, I just can't thank them enough, and encourage the parents that are out there to participate. It's just, there's so much to be done, and every person helping is wonderful. But it becomes such a great experience for the parents. I can't, last year was the first year that band competitions happened. There were just 3, and this year they were having 6, and people are really excited and enthusiastic, and that's really great to see. Also, I watched your North Central Washington interview with Dan Kuntz, our superintendent. That was a great interview. Thank you for doing that and encouraging the public with that. I'm hoping to move that 10% number higher. And that's all on that.
And I don't have anything today either, so I will turn it over to Bill for the superintendent's report.
Thank you. we have had our first in official count day. And so Ron's going to pull up some slides. I'll give you a very quick update on where we're at with count. And then a few other updates. So we've done our first official count day in September. That was on September 7th. And I have initial enrollment information to share with you. And as we talked about in the budget hearing in August, enrollment directly impacts our revenues. So we're watching the numbers very closely. And Ron, if you want to go to that next slide. Thank you. Here's a little bit of the tail of the tape. So at this point, it's looking like our projected enrollment is very close to what we actually are seeing in September. The K-12 enrollment is up 24 FTE from what we had budgeted in terms of numbers without running start, which begins in October. And I'll give you the actual numbers here in a moment. But again, some of the largest changes that we have seen were, there were some decreases in the Internet Washington or Wenatchee Internet Academy, and then some increases to the high school. The next slide shows a little more detail about this, and focusing in on those two numbers at the bottom, they give the picture of our budgeted enrollment versus what we actually saw on September 7th. And again, the numbers in those red boxes that we're focusing on do not include running start numbers. So that's the two that I'm comparing. Our overall budgeted enrollment with running start was the 7,142. I'm looking at the number without running start because we don't know the running start numbers yet. If you compare those two, that's the 24 difference. We're 24 greater than what we were projecting, minus the running start students. And in October, when we see the running start numbers with Wenatchee Valley College starting, I'll give you another update on our count at that time. But this is good news that our projections were very close. And in fact, we're looking a little higher than projected at this point by at least 24.
So is it true that during the school year, the numbers tend to increase as we get farther into the year?
That's definitely true in October as a trend. And part of that is we'll see the running start come in. But the other part of that is students that come in after the count day, which is the fourth, I believe it's the fourth day of school. We'll still have students enrolling. I've seen parents coming in the district office getting packets, and we know it's happening online as well. So I expect some initial increases. It does level off a little bit after that.
Thank you.
Yep, you bet.
Just, I don't know if it helps as a projection, but our running start numbers are about 70% down compared to last year. But again, that's district wide. So not school district, but college district.
Great.
17.
Okay. I have just a few other updates for you guys. As you know, that when the school year kicks off, our high school athletes are engaging in competitive games and meets across the region. We have football, cross country, girls soccer, and volleyball. And I want to invite the board members and the members of our community to come and cheer on our teams at all levels. And parents, if you are interested in supporting our athletes, you can learn more about how to do that by becoming a member of our booster clubs. There's information online at pantherboosterclub.org, or you can contact our athletic department to learn about how to become a booster club sponsor. In addition, we have our fall district musical that I'm looking forward to, SpongeBob the Musical, this year. And I'm certain it's going to be an exciting production, and I would love to invite the board and community members to attend the show in November. Those are great productions. Over and above athletics and the music programs, in addition to those things, we have a variety of clubs and activities available to students that start up this time of year. And I want to use this as an opportunity to encourage students to consider finding an activity, a club, a sport, or other program to engage with and become involved. There's a lot of research around involvement in school and how important it is to the school experience. So encourage students and families to look at those options. And last but not least, let's talk about Wenatchee High School HVAC. So Columbia Crane is scheduled to be on site on Monday, the 19th, to set up their crane in the front parking area. We have one additional compressor lift to conduct. They're going to set up the crane in front of the auditorium at 4 p.m. So after students are primarily gone for the day, so that they can be ready to go Tuesday morning at 5:30 a.m. to do that lift. With the crane already set up and a 5:30 start time, we're anticipating school is just going to start normally on Tuesday, the 20th. They should be done with the lift by 6:30, which is well before people will be in that area of the building. However, the parking lot will remain barricaded until roughly 10 a.m. so they can take the crane down after the lift, and then we'll resume business as usual in the parking area. And while we're excited to get this final lift done, we know we have more to consider in order to provide a permanent solution to the cooling system issues at the high school. And I will bring that back to the board as I continue to explore some options there, not only for financing the work, but also for how we might do that in a timely manner. I'm excited to have Sean Fitzgerald with us tonight. I've been chomping at the bit to get him in and get him involved, and I will bring him up to speed on our HVAC system as he comes in the door next week. So welcome to Sean, and that concludes my report for tonight.
Thank you, Bill. Anybody have any questions for Bill at this point on those burning issues?
No, I just want to say, God, sorry. No, I just want to say I appreciated you being really proactive about watching the smoke and getting out there, that we were watching the smoke in the buildings because of the HVAC system issues that have become very public. Because that was, I think I sent you a message, one of my concerns going, oh shoot, are we making sure that the building itself is safe throughout the day with smoke in there, given that we've publicized all these issues. And so I was appreciated seeing that you put out a good statement that we are very much on top of it and watching it. And I thought that was great.
Thank you.
With that, I adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much, everybody.